The words sliced through the parlor like a whip crack. Every eye in the room locked on Reed Brooks as he stood beside Lila Whitmore. Not the beautiful, delicate Ivy everyone expected, but her older sister, the one with calloused hands and dirt under her fingernails. The one nobody ever looked at twice. Lila's father's face turned purple with rage. Ivy's practiced smile shattered. And Lila? She stood frozen, waiting for Reed to take it back, to laugh, to reveal the cruel joke. But he didn't. The cold wind cut across the Montana territory like a dull blade, slow and mean. Lila Whitmore felt it through the worn fabric of her work coat. She hauled another armload of firewood toward the house. Her fingers had gone numb some time ago, but she'd learned to ignore that particular discomfort years back. There were always more important things than her own comfort, like keeping the stoves lit before her father's guests arrived. Through the kitchen window, she could see them preparing. Her younger sister, Ivy, stood in the parlor like a porcelain doll, turning slowly while their mother adjusted the emerald dress that probably cost more than Lila earned in months of ranch work. Not that Lila earned anything, she just worked. That was the arrangement nobody bothered explaining, because everyone understood it without words. "Lila!" Her father's voice carried from the house, sharp and impatient. "Where's that firewood?" She didn't answer, answering wasted breath she needed for carrying. She kicked open the kitchen door and dropped the load beside the cast-iron stove, bark and splinters scattering across the floor she'd scrubbed that morning. Her mother appeared in the doorway, lips pressed thin. "Clean that up and for heaven's sake, use the back entrance. Mr. Brooks will be here within the hour." "Mr. Brooks has seen worse than wood chips, Mama. Not in this house, he hasn't." Her mother's eyes traveled over Lila's appearance, with barely concealed disappointment. "Go upstairs and make yourself presentable. Ivy can't be the only daughter visible tonight." Lila almost laughed. Presentable? As if there were any dress in this house that could transform her into something worth looking at. She'd tried that game once, years ago, before she understood how it worked. Before she learned that some daughters were meant to be displayed, and others were meant to make sure the display didn't fall apart. "I'll wash up," Lila said, "but I'm not changing. If Mr. Brooks wants to see the Whitmore family, he should see all of it, even the parts we keep in the barn." Her mother's face hardened. "Your father knows exactly what I do around here." Lila moved past her toward the stairs. "He just prefers everyone else doesn't." The hot water in the basin upstairs was a luxury someone had prepared for Ivy. Lila used what was left, scrubbing the dirt from under her fingernails with a brush that had seen better days. Her face in the mirror looked weathered for her years. Brown hair pulled back in a braid that had started neat at dawn and given up by midday. Skin tanned from work that wasn't supposed to mark a lady. Gray eyes that held no illusions about what tonight meant. Reed Brooks was coming to choose a bride. Everyone knew it. The arrangement had been negotiated, in careful letters between her father and Garrett Brooks over the past months. The Whitmore ranch was dying, slowly, painfully, but definitely dying. Debts piled up like winter snow. Cattle prices had dropped. The water rights dispute with the Hendersons was bleeding them dry in legal fees they couldn't afford. The Brooks Ranch, on the other hand, was an empire. Thousands of acres. Profitable herds. Political connections that reached all the way to the territorial governor. But even empires needed alliances, and apparently, Garrett Brooks had decided a marriage would seal this particular deal better than a handshake. So Reed was coming to inspect the merchandise. Lila pulled on her only clean shirt. Plain blue cotton, serviceable, and her work pants. Her mother would hate it. Her father would probably send her back upstairs. But she was tired of pretending she was something she wasn't. If she had to stand in that parlor and watch her sister get chosen like a prize heifer, she'd at least do it honestly. The voices downstairs had changed, deeper now, male. Lila descended the stairs slowly, each step careful and deliberate. Not because she was nervous. She'd stopped getting nervous about these things. but because she wanted to see him before he saw her. Reed Brooks stood in the center of the parlor like he owned it. Tall, with the kind of build that came from actual work rather than gymnasium exercises, dark hair, strong jaw, eyes that didn't match his polite smile. He wore a suit, but it looked uncomfortable on him, like something he'd put on for the occasion and would shed the moment he got home. Beside him stood his father, Garrett Brooks, older, harder, with eyes that calculated the value of everything they touched. And beside the senior Brooks stood Lila's father, Harlan Whitmore, wearing his best coat and his best performance of a man who hadn't mortgaged everything, including his daughters. "Ah, Ivy." Harlan's voice dripped with pride. "Come, meet Mr. Reed Brooks." Ivy glided forward, and Lila had to admit her sister had mastered the art. Every movement measured, graceful, designed to catch light and attention. The emerald dress whispered against the floor. Her blonde hair caught the lamplight. Her smile was warm but not eager, interested but not desperate. "Mr. Brooks." Ivy extended her hand. "It's a pleasure." Reed took her hand, bowed slightly over it. "Miss Whitmore, your father has spoken very highly of you." "I hope not too highly," Ivy said, a practiced laugh. "I'd hate to disappoint." Lila watched from the stairs, forgotten. This was the transaction. This was how it worked. Ivy would charm, father would negotiate, and eventually the Brooks men would leave with an agreement that would save the Whitmore ranch in exchange for one beautiful daughter. Then Reed's eyes lifted, found Lila, standing there on the stairs in her work clothes and worn boots. Something shifted in his expression, not attraction. Lila wasn't fool enough to mistake it for that. More like recognition, the way you might spot something unexpected in a familiar landscape. "And this is?" Reed's question hung in the air. Her father turned, saw Lila, and his jaw tightened. "My older daughter, Lila. She was just bringing in firewood," Lila finished, descending the last few steps. Someone had to make sure everyone stayed warm. An uncomfortable silence spread through the parlor. Her mother looked mortified. Ivy's smile stayed fixed, but her eyes went cold. Garrett Brooks' expression suggested he'd found a rat in his dinner, but Reed Brooks was still looking at Lila with that strange, searching expression. "Firewood," he repeated. "In this weather, I imagine that's not easy work." "It's work," Lila said. "Same as any other." "Lila helps around the property," her father said quickly, damage control spinning into motion. "She's very capable, but please, Mr. Brooks, let's sit. We have much to discuss." The evening proceeded according to script. Ivy sat beside Reed on the settee, answering questions about her education. Excellent, her musical abilities, accomplished, her interests, appropriately cultured. She was perfect. Lila could have recited the performance from memory. Garrett Brooks directed most of the conversation, steering it toward business arrangements while maintaining the fiction that this was purely social. Harlan Whitmore agreed with everything, laughed at every joke, and slowly sold his daughter with the desperate charm of a man watching his entire world collapse. Lila served coffee, poured drinks, remained invisible, except when usefulness demanded otherwise. But every time she moved through the room, she felt Reed Brooks watching her. Not the way men usually watched when they wanted something, more like he was trying to figure out a puzzle that didn't quite fit the pattern he expected. As the evening drew on, Garrett Brooks stood. "Well, Harlan, I believe we've had a productive evening. Reed, we should head back. Early morning tomorrow." "Of course." Reed rose, but his attention stayed on Lila as she collected empty cups. "Miss Lila, do you ride?" The question came out of nowhere. Everyone in the parlor froze. Yes," Lila said. "Someone has to check the fence lines." "The north pastures are beautiful this time of year, even in winter," Reed said. "Perhaps you could show me the property tomorrow, if your father permits." Harlan Whitmore's smile looked painful. "I'm sure Ivy would be delighted to." "I'd like Miss Lila to show me," Reed interrupted, polite but firm. If she's the one checking fence lines, she knows the land better than anyone. Garrett Brooks' expression darkened. Reed, we discussed a tour of the property, Reed finished. And Miss Lila clearly works the property. Makes sense she'd give the tour. Leela's heart hammered against her ribs. This wasn't how it worked. This wasn't the script. She glanced at Ivy, who sat frozen with that perfect smile cracking at the edges. Of course, Harlan Whitmore said, though his voice had gone tight. Lila would be honored. Shall we say mid-morning? Mid-morning is fine. Reed nodded to the room. Ladies, Harlan, until tomorrow. The Brooks men left, and the moment the door closed, the parlor exploded. What the hell was that? Harlan Whitmore's face had gone crimson. He's supposed to be courting Ivy. He was just being polite, Lila's mother said quickly. Asking about the property, nothing more. He looked at her, Ivy said quietly, and for the first time Lila heard something genuine in her sister's voice, something hurt and confused. The whole evening he kept looking at her, because she looked like a field hand in my parlor. Harlan turned on Lila. What were you thinking coming down dressed like that? You told me to be presentable, Lila said. This is what presentable looks like on me. Don't be smart with me. That man is our only chance to save this ranch and you. I didn't do anything, Lila said, exhausted suddenly. I brought in firewood. I served coffee. I stayed out of the way, just like always. Then why did he ask for you? Her father's voice dropped to something dangerous. What did you do? Nothing. I don't know. And that was true. Lila had no idea why Reed Brooks had singled her out. It didn't make sense. Men like him didn't notice women like her. That was how the world worked. Well, you'll fix it tomorrow, Harlan said. You'll take him on this damn tour. You'll talk up Ivy the entire time, and you'll make it clear where his attention should be. Understood? Leela nodded. There was no point arguing. That night, lying in her narrow bed listening to the wind rattle her window, Lila tried to make sense of it. Maybe Reed Brooks was just being kind. Maybe he felt sorry for the rough-handed older sister, clearly pushed aside for the prettier one. Maybe he genuinely wanted to see the property and didn't care who showed him. Or maybe, a small voice whispered, he saw something the others didn't. Leela crushed that thought immediately. That kind of hope was dangerous. She'd learned that years ago. Morning came cold and clear. Lila was up before dawn, same as always, tending to the horses and checking the animals. By the time Reed Brooks arrived, she'd already put in half a day's work. He came alone. That surprised her. No father watching over his shoulder, no chaperone insisting on propriety. Just Reed Brooks on a big gray horse, dressed in practical riding clothes that looked far more comfortable than the night before. Miss Lila. He tipped his hat. Mr. Brooks. She'd saddled her own horse, a bay mare named Rosie, who'd seen better days but still had good instincts. The property's not much to see this time of year, but I'll show you what we have. They rode in silence for the first stretch, following the fence line toward the north pastures. Lila pointed out boundaries, water sources, sections that needed repair. She spoke plainly, without embellishment, the way she talked to one of the ranch hands. Reed listened without interrupting. Finally, as they crested a small hill overlooking the valley, he spoke. You do all this yourself? Not all of it. We have 2 hands who help. But most of it, yes. Your father is busy managing finances and legal matters, Lila said, repeating the script she'd been taught. And Ivy handles the household and social obligations. And you handle everything else. It wasn't a question, but Lila answered anyway. Someone has to. Reed dismounted near a section of fence that sagged badly, running his hand along the worn wood. This needs replacing. I know, along with about 40 other sections. We don't have the lumber. The water rights dispute with the Hendersons, how bad is it? Lila hesitated. This wasn't proper conversation. She wasn't supposed to know about these things, much less discuss them with a potential business partner. But lying seemed pointless. He'd find out eventually if this alliance happened. Bad, she said. We've been sharing creek access for years, but some time ago they tried to cut us off completely. Said the original agreement was invalid. It's been in court ever since, bleeding us dry. Who's in the right? Legally, probably us. Practically, doesn't matter. We can't afford to keep fighting, and they know it. Reed was quiet for a long moment, studying the fence, the land, the distant mountains. Your father seems to think a marriage alliance with my family will solve his problems. Leela's hands tightened on the reins. My father thinks a lot of things. And what do you think? The question caught her off guard. Nobody asked what she thought about anything. I think, Lila said carefully, that alliances only work if both sides honor them, and I think marriage is a hell of a thing to stake a ranch on. Reed turned to look at her fully. You don't approve of this arrangement. Doesn't matter if I approve. It's not my arrangement. But it's your sister. Ivy knows what she's getting into. She's been prepared for this kind of match her whole life. Lila kept her voice neutral. She'll make you a good wife, Mr. Brooks. She's beautiful, educated, cultured, everything a man in your position should want. And what if that's not what I want? Lila's heart stuttered. She told herself she'd misheard, misunderstood. I don't follow. Reed mounted his horse again, but he didn't move to ride. Last night, when I looked around your parlor, you want to know what I saw? I saw a stage, everyone playing their parts perfectly. Your father, the desperate landowner. My father, the calculating empire builder. Your sister, the perfect bride. Even my own role. The dutiful son making an advantageous match. That's how these things work, Lila said. I know. I've been to a dozen of these arrangements. Met a dozen perfect daughters in a dozen beautiful parlors. And every single one felt exactly the same. Empty. Performed. He looked at her. Then you came down those stairs in work clothes with dirt under your fingernails. And, for the first time in months, I saw something real. Lila couldn't breathe properly. This was wrong. This was dangerous. Mr. Brooks, you should know that my father instructed me to spend today talking up my sister's virtues, making sure you understood where your attention should be focused. Did he now? Yes. So let me be clear. Ivy is kind, intelligent, and accomplished. She plays piano beautifully. She speaks French. She'll host dinners and manage your household and never embarrass you in front of important people. She's everything I'm not. And what are you? The question hung between them like smoke. I'm the daughter who makes sure the firewood gets brought in, Lila said finally. That's all. I don't believe that. Believe what you want, Mr. Brooks. But I know how this story goes. You'll marry Ivy. The alliance will save my father's ranch, and everyone gets what they need. That's the arrangement. What if I want a different arrangement? Then you're a fool, Lila said bluntly. Ivy is the prize here. I'm just the help. Reed studied her for a long moment, something complicated moving behind his eyes. Then he smiled. Not the polite social smile from last night, but something genuine and slightly reckless. You know what my father told me before we left last night? He said, choose the pretty one. She'll photograph well and won't embarrass us at social functions. That's what he thinks marriage is for. Display and contracts. He's not wrong, Lila said. Not in your world. Maybe I'm tired of my world. They rode back slowly, the sun climbing toward midday. Lila's mind raced, trying to figure out what game Reed Brooks was playing. Men in his position didn't choose the rough-handed older sister. They just didn't. It violated every social rule, every practical consideration, every lesson Lila had learned about her place in the world. Unless he was toying with her. The thought arrived cold and sharp. Maybe this was some kind of test. Maybe he wanted to see if she'd overstep, get ideas above her station, embarrass herself by imagining she could compete with Ivy. Well, she wouldn't give him the satisfaction. When they reached the barn, Lila dismounted quickly. Thank you for the tour, Mr. Brooks. I'm sure my father will be eager to hear your thoughts. I have work to finish. She led Rosie into the barn without looking back. That evening, when the Brooks men returned for dinner, Everything went wrong. The meal was elaborate. Harlan Whitmore had spent money they didn't have to impress. Ivy wore a different dress, even more stunning than the night before. The table glittered with their best silver, polished until it hurt to look at. Lila had been instructed to eat in the kitchen. She was halfway through a cold plate when her father appeared in the doorway, face pale. "Lila, parlor, now." Her stomach dropped. "What's wrong?" "Just come." The parlor felt airless when she entered. Her mother sat rigid on the settee. Ivy stood by the window, her back to the room. Garrett Brooks looked like he'd swallowed something poisonous, and Reed Brooks stood in the center of it all, chin raised, shoulders squared. "Tell her," Harlan Whitmore said, voice strangled. Reed turned to Lila. "I've informed both our fathers that if this alliance is to proceed, you're the daughter I intend to marry. Not Ivy. You." The floor dropped out from under Lila's world. "No," she heard herself say. "No, that's not. You can't." "You're choosing her." Harlan Whitmore's voice climbed toward hysteria. "The stable girl over my daughter." "I'm choosing the woman who actually runs this ranch," Reed said calmly. "The woman who knows every fence line, every water source, every problem you've been hiding behind pretty dresses and dinner parties. I need a partner, Mr. Whitmore, not a decoration." "This is insane," Garrett Brooks said. "Reed, we discussed." "You discussed," Reed interrupted. "I'm deciding." Ivy finally turned from the window. Her face was composed, but Lila could see the devastation underneath. "It's fine," Ivy said quietly, "if that's what Mr. Brooks wants." "It's not fine." Harlan Whitmore's face had gone purple. "Lila is completely unsuitable. She has no social graces, no education, She has more practical knowledge than half the ranchers in this territory," Reed said. "Including you, sir, if you'll pardon my saying so." The insult hung in the air like gun smoke. Harlan Whitmore looked at Lila with something between rage and desperation. "Refuse him." "What?" "Refuse him. Tell him you won't marry him. Tell him the arrangement is for Ivy, as it should be." Lila's mind reeled. This was madness. Reed Brooks was offering her an escape from this house, from invisibility, from a future of endless work and no acknowledgement. And her father wanted her to refuse it, so Ivy could have what Ivy was supposed to have. The old Lila would have done it. The Lila who believed she existed only to make sure everyone else got what they needed. But something had broken inside her today. When Reed Brooks looked at her on that hill and asked what she thought, when he saw value in the parts of her everyone else treated as worthless. "No," Lila heard herself say. "What did you say?" "I said no." Her voice got stronger. "If Mr. Brooks wants to marry me, I accept." Her father's face went white. "Lila, I'm warning you. Warn all you want." 26 years of silence cracked open. "You've treated me like hired help my entire life, worked me like a ranch hand, fed me kitchen scraps, kept me invisible so Ivy could shine. And now you want me to refuse the one man who's ever seen me as more than a pair of hands. No, I'm done making myself small for your comfort." "You ungrateful." Lila's mother's voice cut through, quiet but firm. "Stop." Everyone turned to stare at her. Lila's mother stood slowly, her face unreadable. "She's right. We've used her shamefully. I've used her shamefully." She looked at Lila with something that might have been regret. "If Mr. Brooks sees value in you, perhaps we should have seen it too." "Margaret, you can't be serious." "I'm entirely serious." She turned to Reed. "If my daughter accepts your proposal, she goes with my blessing, such as that's worth." Ivy made a small sound, quickly stifled. Garrett Brooks stood abruptly. "This is ridiculous, Reed. We're leaving now." "I'm staying," Reed said, "to finalize arrangements." "You're throwing away a perfectly good alliance for a woman who can actually help me build something," Reed finished. "Yes, father, I am." Garrett Brooks stared at his son with cold fury. Then he grabbed his coat and hat. "Fine. Ruin yourself. but don't expect me to clean up the mess." He slammed out of the house. The silence he left behind felt fragile, like glass about to shatter. Harlan Whitmore looked at Lila with something she'd never seen before. Not love, not respect, but a kind of bitter recognition that she'd finally become someone he couldn't control. "Get out," he said quietly. "Both of you, get out of my house." "Harlan," Lila's mother started. "I said get out." He was shaking. "If she wants to humiliate this family, she can do it elsewhere." Reed moved to Lila's side. "Can you be ready to leave in a short while?" Lila thought about her room upstairs. The narrow bed, the worn clothes, the few possessions she'd accumulated in years of making herself useful. None of it felt worth keeping. "I'm ready now," she said. They walked out together into the cold night. The chill bit through Lila's shirt, but she barely felt it. Behind her, she heard Ivy crying softly, and her mother's voice trying to comfort. Her father's rage followed them all the way to the barn. Reed saddled both horses while Lila stood there, numb and shaking. "You didn't have to do that," she said. "Any of it." "Yes, I did. You checked the cinch on his saddle. I'm tired of building my life according to my father's blueprints, and I'm tired of watching strong women get treated like furniture." "You don't even know me." "I know enough." He turned to her. "I know you keep an entire ranch running with 2 hands and no recognition. I know you tell the truth even when lying would be easier. I know you're strong enough to survive out here. And that's more than I can say for most people." He paused. "But if you want to stay—" "There's nothing for me here," Lila said. "There never was." They mounted and rode into darkness, leaving the Whitmore ranch behind. Lila didn't look back. If she had, she might have seen her mother standing in the doorway watching her daughter disappear. She might have seen Ivy at the window, one hand pressed to the glass. She might have seen her father in the parlor staring at the empty space where his useful daughter used to stand. But Lila kept her eyes forward, riding towards something she couldn't name. Something terrifying and possible, and entirely her own choice. The Brooks Ranch appeared on the horizon just after midnight, a sprawling collection of buildings lit against the darkness like a small city. Lila had heard about the scale of the operation, but seeing it stole her breath. This wasn't a ranch. This was an empire. Reed led her past the main barns toward a house that looked more like a mansion. Lights glowed in several windows despite the late hour. "My father will be waiting," Reed said. "Fair warning, he won't make this easy." "I didn't expect easy." They tied the horses and climbed the steps to a wide porch. Before Reed could open the door, it swung inward. Garrett Brooks stood there, scotch in hand, eyes cold. "So you actually brought her?" "I did," Reed said. Garrett looked Lila up and down like she was livestock at auction. "You realize this is suicide for the Alliance. Harlan Whitmore won't honor any agreement now. You've humiliated his favored daughter and stolen the wrong one." "I didn't steal anyone," Reed said. "Lila made her own choice." "Did she now?" Garrett stepped aside to let them in. "Well then, Miss Lila, welcome unto the Brooks Ranch. I do hope you understand what you've gotten yourself into." The interior of the house was overwhelming. High ceilings, expensive furniture, walls covered in paintings and trophies. Everything designed to remind you exactly how much power the Brooks family held. Lila had never felt smaller in her life. "Rosa will show you to a room," Garrett said, gesturing to an older woman who'd appeared from somewhere. "We'll discuss arrangements in the morning, assuming you both come to your senses by then." Lila followed Rosa up a grand staircase and down a hallway lined with closed doors. The room Rosa opened was bigger than Lila's entire bedroom back home, with a 4-poster bed and curtains that probably cost more than a good horse. "Bathroom is through there," Rosa said, pointing. "If you need anything, pull that cord. Someone will come." "Thank you," Lila managed. Rosa started to leave, then paused. "For what it's worth, I think the young Mr. Brooks made a good choice. We could use someone real around here." Then she was gone, and Lila was alone in a room designed for someone who belonged. She sat on the edge of the bed, still wearing her work clothes, still smelling of horses and cold night air. Around her, the mansion settled into silence. Expensive, suffocating silence. What had she done? Hours ago, she'd been invisible, miserable, but at least familiar with her misery. Now, she was engaged to a man she barely knew, living in a house that felt like a museum, facing a future that made no sense according to any rules she understood. But when she closed her eyes, she remembered standing on that hill with Reed Brooks, speaking truthfully for the first time in years, being seen for the first time in her life. Maybe that was worth the terror. Lila lay back on the impossibly soft bed and stared at the ceiling, listening to the foreign sounds of her new prison, or her new freedom. She wouldn't know which until morning. Dawn came too early and too bright. Lila woke disoriented, tangled in sheets that felt like silk against her work-roughened skin. For a moment, she didn't remember where she was. Then it all crashed back. The choice, the fight, the midnight ride. Garrett Brooks' cold eyes measuring her worth and finding her lacking. She sat up, muscles stiff from yesterday's tension. Through the window, she could see the Brooks ranch, spreading out in every direction. Bigger in daylight than it had seemed in darkness. Barns, corrals, outbuildings, workers already moving between them like ants in a well-organized colony. This was what Reed stood to inherit. This was what his father thought she'd ruin. Someone knocked on the door. "Come in," Lila called, expecting Rosa. Instead, Reed entered, already dressed for work in worn jeans and a flannel shirt that looked like he'd owned it for years. He carried a cup of coffee that smelled strong enough to wake the dead. "Thought you might need this." He set it on the bedside table. "How'd you sleep?" "Like someone who just burned down her entire life." Lila reached for the coffee. "Your father hate me yet? He hated you before you got here. Now, he's just deciding how to get rid of you." Reed sat in the chair by the window, casual as if visiting women's bedrooms at dawn was perfectly normal. "He's called a family meeting for mid-morning. That gives us some time." "For what?" "For me to show you what you're actually getting into." He stood. "Get dressed. Wear something you can work in." Lila almost laughed. "That's all I own." A short while later, they were walking through the main barn, boots crunching on fresh straw. The scale of the operation made Lila's old ranch look like a child's plaything. Dozens of horses in clean stalls, tack organized with military precision, ranch hands moving with the efficiency of people who knew exactly what was expected. A few of them nodded to Reed. Most of them stared at Lila like she was a curiosity that had wandered in from somewhere else. "We run about 2,000 head of cattle across 4 ranges, Reed was saying. "Employ a good number of full-time hands, another group seasonal during roundup. My father built this from nothing over the years. He's proud of it. Won't let anyone forget it. Including you, especially me." Reed led her toward a corral where several men were working with young horses. "He expects me to expand it, double the herd, acquire more land, push into markets back east, build an empire worthy of the Brooks name. And you don't want that?" Reed was quiet for a moment, watching a sorrel colt buck against a training rope. "I want to build something that lasts. That's not the same thing as building something big." One of the ranch hands approached, older, weathered, with the kind of face that had seen everything twice. "Boss, we got a problem with the fence line up on the North Ridge. Whole section came down in the wind last night." "How many posts?" "Maybe 20. Could have been worse, but we'll need lumber. I'll ride up after the meeting." Reed turned to Lila. "This is Cal Gardner, our foreman. Cal, this is Lila Whitmore. She'll be working with us." Cal's eyebrows climbed toward his hat. "Working with us, or—" "Working," Lila said firmly. "What kind of fence are we talking about?" Cal glanced at Reed, uncertain, then back at Lila. "Split rail mostly, keeps the cattle from drifting into Henderson property." "The Hendersons who are fighting your father over water rights?" "The same." Cal's expression shifted, reassessing. "You know about that?" "I know my father's been bleeding money on lawyers while the Hendersons cut off creek access. I know it's going to bankrupt him inside half a year." Lila looked at Reed. I'm guessing your father thought a marriage alliance would solve that problem. Tie the properties together, make the dispute irrelevant. That was the idea, Reed said. Except I'm not Ivy and my father probably wants me dead right now, which means that alliance is toast. Leela turned back to Cal. So, when that fence comes down and cattle drift onto Henderson land, we've got a different problem entirely. Cal's face split into something like a grin. I'll be damned. She actually knows ranching. She actually does, Reed said, which is why when my father tries to tear her apart at breakfast, I'd appreciate the men remembering who fixes fence lines around here. Cal nodded slowly. Word travels fast in a bunkhouse. I'll make sure it travels in the right direction. They continued walking, Reed pointing out various buildings and operations while Lila memorized everything. She'd always been good at this, absorbing information, understanding systems, seeing how pieces fit together. Her father had never valued the skill. Maybe here it would matter. The house loomed ahead, grand and intimidating in morning light. Lila's stomach tightened. Your father's going to want me gone, she said. Probably. And you're going to fight him on it. Definitely. Leela stopped walking. Why, you barely know me. For all you know, I'm terrible. I could be lazy, stupid, mean as a snake. Are you? No. But that's not the point. You're risking your relationship with your father, your inheritance, your entire future on someone you met yesterday. Reed turned to face her fully. You want to know what I saw yesterday? I saw a woman who works harder than most men, speaks truth when everyone else is lying, and has more practical knowledge in her little finger than my father's last 3 business partners combined. I saw someone real in a world that's mostly performance. He paused. And I saw someone brave enough to choose something terrifying over something safe. That's not nothing, Lila. It might not be enough. Then we'll find out together. The family meeting took place in a dining room that could seat 20. Currently, it seated 3. Garrett Brooks at the head of the table, Reed to his right, Lila across from Reed where she could face Garrett directly. Rosa brought coffee and disappeared quickly, like she knew what was coming. Garrett didn't waste time on pleasantries. I'll make this simple. This marriage is not happening. Yes, it is, Reed said calmly. You're throwing away a strategic alliance with the Whitmores. Harlan Whitmore's ranch is dying. We both know that. The only value in that alliance was combining properties to solve the Henderson dispute. But there are other ways to handle the Hendersons. By marrying the daughter nobody wanted? Garrett looked at Lila. No offense, Miss Whitmore, but you're not what we negotiated for. None taken, Lila said. I'm aware I wasn't the prize. Then you understand this is impossible. You have no social connections, no education, no— She understands ranching, Reed interrupted. Which is more than I can say for most of the daughters you've paraded in front of me. Garrett's eyes went cold. We have investors coming in a short while. Important men from back east. They expect to see a Brooks family that looks like success. Polished, sophisticated, powerful. How exactly do you plan to present her? As my wife, Reed said. Same as I'd present anyone. They'll laugh at you, at us. We'll lose millions in potential investment because you wanted to make some romantic gesture toward a field hand. The words hit like a slap. Lila felt her face flush, but she kept her voice level. Mr. Brooks, I understand I'm not what you wanted for your son, but I'm what he chose. So you've got 2 options. Find a way to work with that, or keep fighting us and watch what it does to your relationship with him. Garrett turned his full attention to her, and Lila understood suddenly why men feared this man. His gaze could cut steel. You think you're brave, Garrett said, standing up to me, making demands. But bravery without intelligence is just stupidity. You have no idea what you've walked into. Then educate me. This ranch represents years of work. Every acre, every building, every dollar was earned through calculation and strategy. I didn't build this by making emotional decisions or rewarding people for having rough hands. He leaned forward. I built it by being smarter and harder than everyone around me. And I'm not about to let my son tear it down because he was charmed by some frontier girl playing at equality. I'm not playing at anything, Lila said. I've worked ranches my entire life. I know cattle, horses, land management, water rights, fence repair, herd rotation, none of which matters in a business meeting with investors who expect a certain presentation. Lila understood then. This wasn't about her skills. It was about her not looking like she belonged in their world, not speaking like them, dressing like them, performing like them. So, hire someone polished for your investor meetings, Lila said. I'll be out fixing the fence line on North Ridge where I can actually be useful. Garrett smiled, but it wasn't friendly. Oh, you'll be at those meetings, Ms. Whitmore. If you're going to ruin this family's reputation, you might as well do it publicly. The meeting ended badly. Garrett left without another word, slamming the door hard enough to rattle the windows. Leela sat there feeling scraped raw. That went well, she said. Reed actually laughed. That was him being restrained, trust me. Your father hates me. My father hates everyone who doesn't fit his master plan. You get used to it. Do you? Lila looked at him. Get used to it. Reed's smile faded. No, but I've learned to survive it. The following days passed in a blur of work and warfare. Lila threw herself into ranch operations, determined to prove her value where it actually counted. She rode fence lines with Cal Gardner, helped repair equipment, worked with the hands during morning roundups. The men were skeptical at first. Another boss's wife playing rancher, until they saw her actually work. Lila could rope, ride, and repair, better than half of them. She didn't complain, didn't quit when things got hard, and didn't expect special treatment. By the fourth day, Cal was assigning her real work instead of make work. By the seventh, some of the hands were actually asking her opinion. Garrett watched all of it with disapproval that bordered on contempt. He never missed an opportunity to undermine her. At dinner, he'd discuss business matters while speaking over Lila as if she wasn't there. When she offered suggestions, he'd dismiss them without consideration. He introduced her to visiting ranchers as Reed's project, leaving the implication hanging. Leela endured it because fighting him openly would only make things worse for Reed. But every slight built pressure inside her like steam in a sealed pipe. Reed saw it. You don't have to take this. Yes, I do, Lila said. They were sitting on the porch after another brutal dinner, where Garrett had spent an hour, discussing investment strategies without once acknowledging Lila's presence. If I fight him every time, it just proves his point that I'm difficult, unsuitable, a problem. You're not a problem. I'm a problem he didn't plan for. That's the worst kind. Lila watched the sunset paint the mountains red. He built this whole empire on control, controlling land, cattle, markets, people, and you brought home someone he can't control. Of course, he hates me. He'll come around. Lila didn't believe that, but she didn't say so. Instead, she asked, Tell me about your mother. Reed went quiet, long enough that Lila thought he wouldn't answer. She died when I was young, he finally said. Fever. It was fast, days from healthy to gone. He paused. My father was different before that, harder after, like something broke in him that never healed. Did she work the ranch? No. She was exactly what my father wanted. Polished, educated, connected to the right families. She knew how to host dinners and navigate society and make everyone feel important. Reed smiled sadly, but she hated it. I found her journals after she died, page after page about feeling like a decoration, a prop in someone else's show. Did your father know? I don't think he cared. She served her purpose. Reed looked at Lila. That's why I didn't want another polished daughter. I watched my mother suffocate slowly in that role. I won't do that to someone else. Lila understood then. This wasn't just about her. It was about Reed refusing to replicate his parents' marriage, refusing to become his father. I'm sorry, she said, about your mother. Me too. That night, Lila couldn't sleep. She wandered downstairs around midnight, thinking she'd find the kitchen, maybe make tea. Instead, she found Garrett Brooks sitting in his study with a whiskey, staring at a portrait on the wall. The woman in the portrait was beautiful. Dark hair, kind eyes, elegant bearing. Eleanor Brooks, presumably. "She would have hated you," Garrett said without looking away from the painting. Lila froze in the doorway. "Excuse me, my wife. She would have seen exactly what you are. A rough-handed nobody trying to climb above her station." He finally turned to look at Lila. She understood the importance of maintaining standards, of marrying appropriately. Did she, Lila heard herself say, or did she just understand how to survive the expectations you put on her? Garrett's eyes went dangerous. "You know nothing about my wife. I know she's dead and you're still trying to control everything around you like that'll bring her back." The words came out sharper than Lila intended, but she didn't take them back. "I know Reed is terrified of becoming like you, and I know whatever you're doing right now, drinking alone in the dark, talking to her portrait, isn't the behavior of someone who's won." For a moment, Lila thought Garrett might actually hit her. He stood abruptly, fury radiating off him in waves. "You have no idea what you're talking about. Maybe not. But I know what it looks like when someone's afraid." Lila held her ground. "You're not angry because I'm unsuitable. You're angry because Reed made a choice you didn't control, and that terrifies you. Get out of my study." "It's not your study, it's just a room where you sit and pretend you're still in control of everything. Get out!" Lila left. Her hands were shaking. That had been stupid, dangerous, possibly suicidal for any hope of peace in this house. But she was so tired of swallowing words, bending, making herself smaller. She made it halfway up the stairs before she heard glass shatter in the study. The next morning, news came that changed everything. Cal Gardner burst into the barn, where Lila was checking on a mare with an injured hoof. "We got trouble. Big trouble." "What kind?" "Cattle thieves hit the South Range last night. Took maybe 40 head. Lila's stomach dropped. 40 head was serious money. "Does Reed know?" "He's riding out now with 6 men, but there's more." Cal's face was grim. "Trail leads toward Henderson property. If Reed crosses that boundary chasing stolen cattle, it'll start a war." Lila finished. The Hendersons were already hostile over the water dispute. Armed Brooks men crossing onto their land would be all the excuse they needed for violence. "I need a horse," Lila said. "Miss Lila!" "Now, Cal, fast one." She caught up to Reed's group some distance out, pushing her horse hard across open range. Reed turned when he heard hoofbeats, his face darkening when he saw her. "Go back. Not happening." Lila pulled up beside Acom. "Cal told me where the trail leads, which is why you should be back at the ranch. So you can ride into an ambush alone?" "Smart." One of the other men, a young hand named Charlie, spoke up. "She's right, boss. Hendersons have been looking for an excuse. This feels like bait." "I don't care if it's bait," Reed said. "They stole 40 head of our cattle. We're getting them back." "And if the Hendersons are waiting with rifles?" Lila demanded. "If they shoot you for trespassing, what then?" "Then we shoot back." Lila had never seen this side of Reed. Cold, determined, angry. This was the rancher, not the man who'd chosen her on a hillside. This was someone who'd fight for what was his, regardless of cost. "There's another way," she said. "What way?" Lila thought fast. "Let me ride ahead, alone. I'll approach the Henderson ranch, explain what happened, ask to parley. They'll laugh at you, maybe. But they won't shoot an unarmed woman riding in openly. If I can get them to talk, we might recover the cattle without bloodshed." "Absolutely not," Reed said. "It's too dangerous. More dangerous than 7 men with guns riding onto hostile property." They argued for another stretch, while the cattle trail grew colder. Finally, Charlie interrupted. "Boss, we're losing time. Either we go now, or we don't go at all." Reed looked at Lila, conflict written across his face. "If anything happens to you, then you'll have excellent grounds to start that war you're itching for," Lila said. "But let me try this first." She rode ahead before he could argue more, following the cattle trail toward the boundary between Brooks and Henderson land. Her heart hammered against her ribs. This was insane. She had no authority, no backup, no real plan beyond hoping the Hendersons valued talking over shooting. The Henderson ranch appeared over a rise, smaller than the Brooks place, but well-maintained. Lila could see cattle in the distance. Some of them looked suspiciously like Brooks stock. She was some distance from the main house when 3 men rode out to meet her, rifles across their saddles. The one in front was older, graying with eyes like flint. "That's far enough. State your business." "My name is Lila Whitmore. I'm here about the cattle stolen from Brooksland last night." "Don't know anything about stolen cattle. 40 head. Trail leads straight here." Lila kept her hands visible, her voice calm. "I'm not accusing anyone. I'm just asking for a conversation before this turns into something nobody wants." The man studied her. "You're the one Reed Brooks married instead of the pretty sister. Word traveled fast in ranching country." "That's me. Heard you got rough hands. Work the ranch yourself." "I do. Also heard Garrett Brooks hates your guts." Lila almost smiled. "That's accurate too." The man exchanged glances with the other 2. "I'm Silas Henderson. This is my land you're on, uninvited." "I know. I'm asking for an invitation. To accuse us of theft. To prevent a war." Lila gestured behind her. "Reed Brooks is back there with 6 armed men, ready to cross your boundary and take those cattle back by force. I convinced him to let me try talking first, so I'm talking. Are you listening?" Silas Henderson was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, "Follow me. But your husband and his men stay where they are." Lila followed the Hendersons to the ranch house, hyper-aware that she was gambling everything on the hope that these men preferred negotiation to violence. Inside, Silas's wife brought coffee while Lila explained the situation. Stolen cattle, the trail, Reed's men waiting at the boundary. "Those cattle were driven onto our land last night," Silas admitted, "but not by us. Found them mixed with our herd this morning. Brooks' brand is clear as day." "Then who drove them here?" "Someone who wants Brooks and Henderson shooting at each other." Silas's face was hard. "We've got our disputes, but I'm not a thief and I'm not stupid. Starting a shooting war over 40 head makes no sense." Lila understood suddenly. "Someone's trying to escalate the water dispute. That would be my guess. Make it personal, make it violent, then swoop in and buy up whatever's left when we've destroyed each other. Who benefits? Could be anyone. Land speculators, rival ranchers, someone who wants both our properties cheap." Silas looked at her. "You seem smart for someone who just got here. Why are you really doing this?" "Because I'm tired of watching men solve problems with bullets when talking might work." Lila set down her coffee cup. "And because if Reed crosses that boundary with guns, someone dies. Maybe him, maybe you, maybe someone's son or father, over cattle that were stolen to create exactly this situation." Silas studied her for a long time. "All right, here's what I'll do. I'll have my men separate those 40 head and drive them back to the boundary, but I want witnesses. Brooks men and Henderson men together. All of us seeing that we're returning stolen property, not starting a fight. And the person who actually stole them. We find them together, share information, figure out who profits from us killing each other." He extended his hand. "Deal." Lila shook it. "Deal." Hours later, both groups of men stood at the boundary while Henderson's hands drove the stolen cattle back across. Reed kept his weapons holstered, but his jaw tight, clearly hating every moment of this restraint. Silas Henderson rode up to him. "Your wife's got more sense than both of us combined. She probably just saved a dozen lives." "She tends to do that," Reed said, looking at Lila with something complicated in his eyes. "Water dispute still stands," Silas said. "But we can talk about that like civilized men instead of killing each other over it." "Agreed." After the Hendersons left, Reed turned to Lila. "That was either the bravest or stupidest thing I've ever seen." "Probably both," Lila admitted. Her hands were shaking now that the adrenaline was fading. "But it worked this time." Reed dismounted, pulled her down from her horse, held her tight enough that she could feel his heart racing. "Don't ever do that again." "Can't promise that." "Lila, you married someone who fixes problems, Reed. That's who I am. I can't stop being that just because it scares you." He pulled back to look at her. "It doesn't scare me. It terrifies me. The thought of you riding into danger alone is the same thought I have every time you do it, Reed, Lila said. So I guess we're even. They rode back to the ranch as the sun climbed toward midday. The men talked among themselves, rehashing the confrontation, speculating about who'd actually stolen the cattle. Lila half listened, exhausted suddenly. But when they reached the main house, Garrett Brooks was waiting on the porch. His face was unreadable as they all dismounted. Cal started to explain what had happened, but Garrett held up a hand. I already heard. One of the Henderson hands rode ahead to tell me you'd negotiated a return. He looked at Lila. Is that accurate? Yes, sir, Lila said. And you did this without consulting me. There wasn't time to consult anyone. Reed was about to start a range war. I had it handled, Reed said. You had a plan to get shot, Lila corrected. I had a plan to not get shot. Mine worked better. Several of the ranch hands tried to hide smiles. Garrett's expression didn't change. Come with me, both of you. They followed him into his study, the same room where Lila had confronted him the night before. Garrett poured himself a whiskey, didn't offer them any. Silas Henderson just sent a rider. Wants to meet next week to discuss the water dispute. Says he's open to negotiation now that cooler heads have prevailed. He looked at Lila. He specifically requested you be present. Lila blinked. Me? Apparently you impressed him. Made him think the Brooks family might actually have someone reasonable to talk to. Garrett took a drink. I still think you're completely unsuitable for this family. I think Reed made a terrible mistake choosing you over a proper alliance. But, Lila said, but you just prevented a war that would have cost me men, cattle, and probably any chance at resolving this water situation peacefully. Garrett set down his glass. So, while I don't like you, don't approve of you, and don't believe you belong here, I'm willing to tolerate your presence, for now. It wasn't acceptance. It wasn't even close to warmth. But it was the first crack in Garrett Brooks' absolute opposition. Thank you, Lila said carefully. Don't thank me. Just don't make me regret this. Garrett turned to Reed. The investor dinner is still happening in a few days. She'll need appropriate clothing and enough coaching to not embarrass us. I can handle myself, Lila said. We'll see. Garrett dismissed them with a gesture. Outside the study, Reed let out a long breath. That's the closest thing to approval you'll ever get from him. He still hates me. Yes, but now he hates you slightly less. Reed smiled. Progress. The next few days were brutal. Lila spent mornings working the ranch and afternoons being tutored by Rosa on proper behavior for formal dinners. Which fork for which course. How to make polite conversation without mentioning anything controversial. The art of smiling while saying nothing of substance. Lila hated every minute. This is ridiculous, she said after the third lesson on proper posture. I'm not going to transform into some society lady in a few days. No one expects you to, Rosa said. But Mr. Brooks expects you not to humiliate him. There's a difference. The night of the dinner arrived like an execution date. Lila stood in her room staring at the dress Rosa had procured. Deep blue, elegantly cut, expensive enough to make Lila's stomach hurt. She'd never worn anything like it. A knock on the door. Reed entered, stopped when he saw her. You look terrified, he said. I am terrified. Your father's right, I'm going to embarrass everyone. Probably. Reed crossed the room, took her hands. But you're also going to be honest, intelligent, and more knowledgeable about actual ranching than anyone in that dining room. So when they ask you questions, answer them. Don't perform, don't try to be Ivy, just be Lila. And if that's not good enough, then they're idiots and we'll take their money anyway. The dining room had been transformed. Crystal glittered, silver gleamed, everything positioned to impress. The investors arrived exactly on time. Several men from back east, all dressed in expensive suits that screamed urban wealth. Garrett made introductions. Gentlemen, my son Reed and his fiancée Lila Whitmore. One of the men smiled politely. Whitmore? Any relation to the Whitmores with the ranch east of here? My father, Lila said. Lovely property. Heard he's having some difficulties with water rights. This was a test. Lila could feel it. Say the wrong thing. Reveal family weakness. Confirm their suspicions that she was unsuitable. Every ranch in this territory has water disputes, Lila said. It's what happens when you're trying to build civilization in a place that doesn't want it. The man laughed. Well said. Dinner proceeded through multiple courses, while Garrett guided conversation toward business opportunities, expansion plans, profit projections. The investors asked intelligent questions. Garrett provided confident answers. Reed supported his father's vision while subtly tempering some of the more aggressive projections. And Lila stayed quiet, playing the role she'd been assigned, until one of the investors turned to her directly. Ms. Whitmore, what do you think of Mr. Brooks' plan to double the herd over the next few years? Every eye turned to Lila. This was it. The moment Garrett had warned her about. The moment she could destroy everything. Lila looked at Garrett, who stared back with cold warning. Then she looked at Reed, who nodded slightly. Tell the truth. I think it's dangerous, Lila said. The table went quiet. Dangerous how? The investor asked. Doubling a herd requires doubling grazing land, water access, and winter feed capacity. This territory doesn't have unlimited resources. Push too hard, overgraze the range, and you destroy the land that makes the whole operation possible. Lila kept her voice calm, factual. My father made that mistake. He expanded too fast, borrowed too much, counted on cattle prices staying high. When they dropped, he couldn't adapt. Now, he's losing everything. Garrett's face had gone carefully blank. So you're suggesting we don't expand? Another investor asked. I'm suggesting expansion needs to be strategic, sustainable, based on actual carrying capacity rather than optimistic projections. Lila looked at Garrett. Ambition is good. Recklessness is fatal. And you base this on, The investor leaned forward, genuinely interested. On watching my father destroy a ranch through greed disguised as vision, and on working land long enough to know what it can actually support. For a moment, Lila thought Garrett would explode. His hands were white-knuckled on his whiskey glass. Then the first investor started laughing. She's got a point, Garrett. We've seen plenty of operations collapse from overexpansion. The ones that last are the ones that grow carefully. Ms. Whitmore clearly understands ranching better than most men I've met, the second added, which is refreshing. Usually these dinners are all bluster and optimism. Nice to hear some practical sense. The evening shifted after that. The investors asked Lila more questions about land management, cattle breeds, market timing. She answered honestly, drawing on years of experience her father had never valued. By the time dessert arrived, the investors were nodding approvingly, and Garrett looked like he'd swallowed glass. After the guests left, Garrett cornered Lila in the hallway. You undermined me. I told them the truth. You made me look reckless in front of men whose money I need. You were being reckless, Lila said, and they knew it. I just said what they were already thinking. You don't know what they were thinking. Yes, I do. They're businessmen. They've seen operations fail from overexpansion. They were testing your judgment. Lila held his gaze. And if I'd sat there nodding along with an unsustainable plan, they would have lost confidence in this entire family. Reed appeared in the hallway. She's right, Father. Marcus told me on his way out that Lila's honesty impressed them. They're moving forward with the investment. Garrett looked between them, fury and reluctant respect warring in his expression. Finally, he said, Don't ever embarrass me like that again. I didn't embarrass you, Lila said. I saved you. She walked away before he could respond, her heart pounding. That had been dangerous, maybe suicidal for her place here. But she was done swallowing truth to make powerful men comfortable. Later that night, she found Reed on the porch, staring out at the dark ranch. You could have backed your father, Lila said. I could have, but you were right. He looked at her. You saved that deal tonight. They would have gone along with his plan, then watched it fail and blamed him for it. Now they trust us to actually know what we're doing. Your father doesn't see it that way. My father doesn't like being wrong. He'll adjust. Reed pulled her close. You were magnificent tonight. Terrifying, but magnificent. Leela leaned against him, exhausted. Behind them, the house loomed dark and massive. Somewhere inside, Garrett Brooks was probably plotting how to get rid of her. But Lila had survived the test. She'd spoken truth and lived through it. For tonight, that was enough. The morning after the investor dinner, Lila woke to find an envelope slipped under her door. No name on it. Just expensive paper sealed with wax. She opened it carefully. The handwriting was elegant, feminine, achingly familiar. Lila, I need to see you. Please don't tell Father, Leela's hands trembled, holding the letter. Ivy. Here. Somehow. She dressed quickly and went downstairs where Rosa was preparing breakfast in the kitchen. Did someone arrive last night? Lila asked after the dinner. Rosa's face went carefully neutral. A young woman came to the servants' entrance around midnight, asked for you specifically. Mr. Garrett doesn't know she's here. Where is she? The guest cottage, the small one by the east barn. Rosa handed Lila a basket. Take her this. She looked half-starved. Lila found Ivy sitting on the cottage steps, still wearing the same traveling dress she must have ridden in. Her hair, usually perfect, hung in tangled waves. Her face was pale, eyes red from crying. Lila! Ivy stood when she saw her, then seemed uncertain what to do with her hands. I didn't know where else to go. Leela set down the basket and waited. Whatever had brought Ivy here, it was bad enough to drive her across hostile territory in the dark to beg help from the sister she'd barely spoken to in years. Father arranged a marriage, Ivy said finally, to Cyrus Pemberton. Lila knew the name. Everyone in the territory did. Cyrus Pemberton was older, owned a bank back east, and had buried 2 wives already. When? Lila asked. Soon. He's already paid Father a significant sum. Ivy's voice cracked. I'm being sold, Lila, just like cattle. Father didn't even ask me, just told me that I was engaged and the wedding was scheduled, and I should be grateful, because Pemberton's money would save the ranch. What did you say? What could I say? I'm young with no skills, no money, no prospects. Father made it very clear that if I refused, I'd be thrown out with nothing. Ivy looked at Lila with desperate eyes. So I ran, stole a horse, and rode all night. I don't even know what I'm asking for. I couldn't marry him, Lila. I couldn't. Lila studied her sister, the beautiful, polished Ivy who'd stood silently in that parlor while their father raged at Lila for accepting Reed's proposal. The sister who'd been trained her whole life to be exactly what men like Cyrus Pemberton wanted. Decorative, obedient, silent. Part of Lila wanted to turn away, wanted to tell Ivy that she'd made her choice when she didn't defend Lila, didn't speak up, didn't question the system that treated daughters like bargaining chips. But a larger part remembered being young and trapped with no good options. Remembered the terror of facing a future you didn't choose and couldn't escape. Come on, Lila said. Let's get you inside. The cottage was small, but clean. Lila got Ivy settled with food and water while her sister explained the rest. How Father had been drinking more since Lila left, raging about betrayal and ungrateful daughters. How he'd sought out Pemberton deliberately, knowing the man would pay well for a young, beautiful wife. How Ivy had overheard him telling Mother that if Lila had ruined one alliance, Ivy would fix it by making a better one. He called it a business opportunity, Ivy said bitterly. Said I should be honored that a man of Pemberton's wealth wanted me. And Mother cried, begged him to reconsider. But she won't stand up to him. She never has. Ivy picked at the bread in the basket. I used to think that made her weak. Now I just think she's trapped too. Leela sat across from her sister, seeing Ivy clearly for maybe the first time. Not a rival or a favored daughter or a symbol of everything Lila wasn't. Just a young woman who'd been raised to be pretty and quiet and was now discovering that pretty and quiet got you sold to old men with bank accounts. You can stay here, Lila said, for now until we figure out what to do. Reed won't want me here. Garrett Brooks certainly won't. They don't get a vote. Lila stood. I'll talk to them. You, rest. You look like you haven't slept in days. Lila. Ivy's voice was small. Why are you helping me? After everything. Lila thought about that. Because someone helped me when I had nowhere to go. Guess I'm returning the favor. She found Reed in the barn working on a saddle repair that probably could have waited, but gave him somewhere to put his hands while thinking. Ivy's here, Lila said without preamble. Reed's hands stilled. Your sister Ivy. She ran away. Father arranged a marriage to Cyrus Pemberton. The banker? He's ancient. He's rich. That's all Father cares about. Lila leaned against a stall door. She's staying in the East Cottage. I told her she could stay until we figure something out. Does my father know? Not yet. I'm telling you first because it'll go better if we present it together. Reed set down the saddle. Lila, having your sister here complicates everything. The alliance with your father is already destroyed. If he finds out we're harboring Ivy after she ran from an arranged marriage. I know he could accuse us of kidnapping, sue us, make this into something ugly. I know that too. Lila met his eyes. But she's my sister and she came here because she had nowhere else to go. I'm not turning her away. Reed was quiet for a long moment. My father is going to lose his mind. Probably. But you once told me you wanted to build something different than what your father built. Here's your chance to prove it. They found Garrett in his office reviewing ledgers. He looked up when they entered, immediately suspicious. This looks like trouble. Lila's sister arrived last night, Reed said. She's staying in the East Cottage. Garrett set down his pen very carefully. The sister you didn't marry. The one whose father is probably sharpening knives with your name on them. Her father arranged a marriage to Cyrus Pemberton, Lila said. She ran away. So she brought her problems to my ranch. Garrett stood. Absolutely not. She leaves today. She stays, Lila said. You don't make decisions about who stays on this property. I'm making this one. Lila held her ground. Ivy has nowhere else to go. Sending her back means sending her into a marriage she doesn't want with a man 3 times her age. Not my problem. Not my ranch's problem. Garrett looked at Reed. Tell her. Reed took a breath. She stays, Father. Lila's right. You're both insane. Harlan Whitmore will come here with lawyers, accusations, demands. He'll turn this into a legal nightmare. Let him try, Lila said. What's he going to claim? That we kidnapped his adult daughter, who rode here of her own free will? That we're forcing her to stay when she's the one who ran from him? He'll claim you corrupted her, turned her against her family. Good. Maybe more daughters should turn against fathers who sell them like livestock. Garrett's face went dark red. You self-righteous little. This isn't about principles. This is about protecting what we've built here, and harboring a runaway bride puts all of it at risk. Then we'll handle the risk, Reed said. Together. You're choosing her side again. I'm choosing not to send a terrified woman back to a man who sees her as property. Reed's voice hardened. You taught me to be strong, Father. You never taught me to be cruel. There's a difference. The words hung in the air like smoke. Garrett looked between them, understanding finally settling in his eyes. This wasn't just about Ivy. This was about Reed drawing a line his father couldn't cross. Fine, Garrett said finally. She can stay, temporarily. But when Harlan Whitmore shows up demanding his daughter back, and he will, you two are handling it. I want nothing to do with this disaster. He left the office, slamming the door, hard enough to rattle the windows. Reed let out a long breath. That went better than expected. He threatened to disown you yesterday. Today he's just angry. That's progress. Lila tried to smile. Right? I have no idea anymore. The next few days passed in tense waiting. Ivy stayed in the cottage, rarely coming out. Lila brought her meals and sat with her while her sister slowly unraveled years of careful composure. All the training, all the lessons in being the perfect daughter, all of it collapsed when Ivy realized it had only made her valuable to men who wanted to own beautiful things. I don't know how to do anything useful, Ivy said one afternoon. I can play piano and speak French and arrange flowers. What good is any of that? You can learn other things. Like what? Ranch work? I don't have your hands, Lila. I can't even saddle a horse. Then learn bookkeeping. Learn household management. Learn something that makes you valuable for reasons besides being pretty. Lila said it gently. You're young. Your life isn't over. It's just starting in a direction you didn't expect. Ivy looked at her with something like envy. You make it sound easy. It's not easy. It's terrifying and hard, and some days I want to quit, but it's mine. That's the difference. On the fourth day, Harlan Whitmore arrived. Lila saw the dust cloud from the North Ridge, where she was working fence with Cal and two other hands. A single rider pushing hard. Even from a distance, she recognized her father's gray gelding. That's trouble, Cal said. Yeah. Lila climbed down from the fence. I need to get back to the house. She made it to the main yard just as her father dismounted. He looked terrible. Thinner, grayer, worn down by whiskey and rage. When he saw Lila, his face twisted. Where is she? Hello, father. Lila stayed calm. Nice to see you, too. Don't play games with me. Where's Ivy? Somewhere safe. She's my daughter. She belongs at home. She's an adult woman who made her own choice to leave, Lila said. Same choice I made. Harlan Whitmore stepped closer, voice dropping to something dangerous. You've poisoned her against me. Filled her head with your rebellious nonsense. This is your fault. My fault? Lila laughed without humor. I didn't arrange her marriage to a man old enough to be her grandfather. That was all you. Cyrus Pemberton is a respectable man who offered good money. There it was. Good money. That's all you see, isn't it? Your daughters aren't people. We're just assets you can sell when you need cash. Her father's hand came up fast. Lila didn't flinch. She'd been hit before, years ago, before she learned to stay out of range. But the blow never landed. Reed caught Harlan's wrist mid-swing. Touch her and you leave here with broken bones. Harlan yanked his arm free. This is family business. She's my family now. That makes it my business. Reed positioned himself between Lila and her father. You want to talk to Ivy? We can arrange that, but you don't get to come onto my property and threaten my wife. She's not your wife yet. Close enough, and my father may tolerate you. I don't have to. For a moment, Lila thought her father might actually swing at Reed, but Harlan Whitmore was a bully, not a fighter. He backed down, redirecting his rage. Ivy is coming home today, or I'll have the law on both of you. On what charge? Lila asked. She rode here herself. She's staying of her own free will. What law have we broken? I'll find one. Harlan's eyes were desperate now. I'll ruin you, both of you. I'll tell everyone what you are, a scheming little witch who destroyed her own family. Tell whoever you want, Lila said. I'm done caring what you think. You'll care when no one in this territory does business with the Brooks Ranch because of you. When investors pull out. Father! Ivy's voice cut across the yard. She stood near the barn, still wearing the simple dress Rosa had given her, hair pulled back in a practical braid. She looked smaller than Lila remembered. Younger, but her voice was steady. Harlan spun toward her. Ivy, thank goodness. Get your things. We're leaving. No. The word hung in the air. What did you say? I said no. Ivy walked closer, each step deliberate. I'm not marrying Cyrus Pemberton. I'm not going back to that house. I'm not... Her voice wavered, but held. I'm not for sale anymore. Harlan's face went white, then red. You ungrateful. After everything I've done for you. You dressed me up and showed me off and treated me like a prize horse, Ivy said. That's not love, Father. That's livestock management. I gave you everything. Education, clothes, opportunities, and you gave me training in how to be valuable to rich men. Ivy's composure cracked slightly. And now you're upset that I don't want to use that training to save your failing ranch. The ranch is failing because your sister destroyed our alliance with the Brooks family. The ranch is failing because you made bad decisions for years and refused to admit it, Lila said. Stop blaming your daughters for your mistakes. Harlan looked between them, understanding finally penetrating his rage. Both daughters standing together, refusing him. His whole strategy collapsed around him. Fine, he said, voice shaking. Keep each other. You're both dead to me. No inheritance, no family, nothing. You want to be independent. Be independent. See how long you last without my name protecting you. Your name has been a weight around my neck since birth, Lila said. I'll manage without it. Harlan Whitmore climbed back on his horse. Before leaving, he looked at Ivy one more time. When you come crawling back, and you will, don't expect me to take you in. I'm done with daughters who don't know their place. Good, Ivy said quietly. I never want to see you again. He rode off in a cloud of dust and bitterness. Lila watched him go, feeling nothing. No sadness, no anger, just a kind of empty relief that the final tie had been cut. Beside her, Ivy was crying, silent tears running down her face while her shoulders shook. Lila put an arm around her sister. You did good. I just destroyed my entire life. No, you just started building a new one. Reed approached carefully. Ivy, you're welcome to stay as long as you need. We'll figure something out. Ivy wiped her eyes. Thank you, both of you. I know this complicates everything. Everything was already complicated, Lila said. This just makes it more interesting. That evening, Garrett summoned them all to his office. Lila, Reed, and Ivy stood before his desk, like students called before a headmaster. Well, Garrett said, that was a disaster. It was necessary, Reed said. Harlan Whitmore will tell everyone in the territory that we're harboring his runaway daughter. He'll poison every business relationship we have. Investors will hear about family chaos and reconsider their commitments. Garrett looked at Lila. This is what happens when you let emotions drive decisions. This is what happens when you stop treating people like property, Lila shot back. Yes, it's messy. Yes, it creates problems, but it's the right thing to do. Right doesn't pay debts. Right doesn't expand operations. Right doesn't build empires. Right doesn't build empires, Lila interrupted. Maybe not, but it builds something that lasts longer than money. Garrett studied her for a long moment. You actually believe that? I do. Then you're naive. He turned to Ivy. Can you work? Or are you just another mouth to feed? Ivy straightened her spine. I can learn. Whatever you need me to do, I'll learn. Bookkeeping, Garrett said. We need someone to organize the accounts, track expenses, manage payroll. It's tedious work that requires attention to detail and no physical strength. Think you can handle it? Yes. You'll work with Rosa. She'll teach you the household accounts first, then move you to ranch operations. Garrett's expression didn't soften. You make mistakes. You're gone. You cause trouble. You're gone. You prove to be useless. You're gone. Understood. Understood. After Ivy left, Garrett poured himself a whiskey. You two are going to be the death of this ranch. Or its salvation, Reed said. Depends on your perspective. My perspective says we're now enemies of the Whitmore family, harboring a runaway and inviting gossip from every rancher in Montana. Garrett took a drink. But I suppose we're committed now. We are, Lila said. Garrett looked at her with something that might have been grudging respect. You don't back down, do you? Not when I'm right. And you think you're always right? No, but I know the difference between right and convenient. You taught your son to build an empire. Someone should have taught him when to burn one down instead. Garrett almost smiled. Almost. Get out of my office, both of you. Outside, Reed let out a breath he'd been holding. I think that's the closest thing to approval you'll ever get from him. He still hates me. Yes, but he's starting to respect you. That's different. The following weeks transformed the ranch in subtle ways. Ivy threw herself into bookkeeping with the desperation of someone who needed purpose to survive. She was good at it. Meticulous, organized, quick with numbers. Within weeks, she'd identified several accounting errors that had been costing them money. Within a month, she'd reorganized the entire system. Your sister has a mind for finance, Garrett said grudgingly one evening. Surprising. Only if you assume she was just decorative, Lila said. The meeting with Silas Henderson happened on a clear morning. Both families gathered at a neutral property. an abandoned line shack halfway between their ranches. Lila, Reed, and Garrett represented the Brooks side. Silas Henderson brought his 2 sons and a lawyer. The water dispute had poisoned relations for years, but the cattle incident had shifted something. Both sides were tired of fighting. Both sides needed resolution more than they needed to win. Lila sat quietly while the men discussed technical details of creek access, seasonal flow rates, historical usage patterns. Garrett presented the Brooks family's position. Silas countered with Henderson claims. The lawyer took notes and suggested compromise language. After hours of negotiation, they'd made almost no progress. The same arguments in circles, the same positions held rigidly. Finally, Lila spoke up. "Can I ask a question?" All eyes turned to her. What do both families actually need, not need, to survive? Silas frowned. Access to the creek, especially in summer when other sources dry up. Same, Garrett said. We can't run our herds without reliable water. So you both need the creek, Lila said. But you're fighting over who owns it rather than how to share it. What if ownership doesn't matter? What if you both agree on a usage schedule instead? We tried that, Silas said. It fell apart when someone violated it and there was no enforcement mechanism. Lila finished. Right. So build enforcement into the agreement. Third-party arbitration for disputes, penalties for violations, regular meetings to adjust the schedule based on actual conditions rather than fixed dates that don't account for weather variation. The lawyer looked intrigued. That could work, if both parties agreed to binding arbitration. They negotiated for another stretch, but the conversation had shifted. Instead of fighting over ownership, they were building a system both families could live with. Creek access would rotate based on seasonal needs. Both ranches would fund a shared water monitoring system. Disputes would go to an impartial third party agreed upon by both families. It wasn't perfect, but it was workable. When they finally shook hands on the basic framework, Silas looked at Lila. You've got a good head on your shoulders, Miss Lila. Your father was a fool to let you go. My father didn't let me do anything, Lila said. I left. On the ride back, Garrett was unusually quiet. Finally, he said, That was good work today. Lila nearly fell off her horse. Thank you. Don't let it go to your head. You still have a long way to go before you understand how this business really works. Of course, sir. But Reed was grinning. Later, when they were alone, he said, That's the first real compliment I've heard him give anyone in years. He still thinks I'm unsuitable. Probably, but he's starting to think you might be useful. That's better. Spring deepened, bringing green to the brown hills and hope to operations that had survived another brutal winter. The investment deal moved forward, though at a smaller scale than Garrett had wanted. The Henderson agreement was formalized with lawyers and witnesses. The ranch settled into a rhythm that felt almost stable. Ivy continued working with the books, slowly building confidence in her own abilities. She still had moments of panic, waking up terrified that father would appear and drag her back. But those moments grew fewer as the weeks passed. One evening, Lila found her sister on the cottage porch, watching the sunset paint the mountains gold. You look settled, Lila said. I look trapped in a different way, Ivy corrected. But it's a better trap. One I chose. That's something. Ivy was quiet for a moment. I owe you an apology for how I acted when you were at home. I knew father treated you terribly. I saw it every day and I said nothing because it benefited me to stay in his good graces. I know. That's all you're going to say? I know. Lila sat beside her. What do you want me to say? That I forgive you? I do. That I understand. I do that too. You were surviving the only way you knew how, same as me. You were braver. I was desperate. That's different from brave. Lila watched the sunset bleed across the sky. But we're both here now, both building something new. That's what matters. Inside the main house, lights came on against the gathering dark. Lila could see Reed moving through the rooms, probably looking for her. Garrett was still in his office, working late as always. Rosa was preparing dinner, her shadow passing across kitchen windows. The strange, complicated family that Lila had somehow become part of. Not perfect, not even particularly comfortable, but real in ways her old life never was. "Come on," Lila said to Ivy. "Dinner's soon and Rosa hates it when we're late." They walked back to the house together. Two sisters who'd been divided by a father's favoritism and reunited by his cruelty. The path between the cottage and the main house was worn smooth by their daily passage. Lila wondered if someday she'd look back and see this moment as the beginning of something good, or maybe she'd see it as a beautiful disaster still unfolding. Either way, it was hers. That counted for something. Inside, Reed greeted them with news. Letter came from the territorial governor's office. They want to meet about expanding rail service west. They specifically requested you be there, Lila. Me? Why, something about wanting input from ranchers who actually work their land. Reed smiled. Seems your reputation is spreading. Garrett appeared in the doorway of his study. The governor's office doesn't request meetings, they summon. This is politics, which means it's complicated and dangerous. So we'll be careful, Lila said. You don't know how to be careful. You know how to charge in and hope things work out. But Garrett didn't look entirely displeased. Still, it's good for the family's reputation. We'll accept. Later that night, Lila lay in bed listening to the house settle around her. Footsteps in the hall, a door closing somewhere, wind against windows. Normal sounds of normal life, except nothing about her life was normal anymore. Months ago, she'd been invisible, useful only for the work she could do in the space she could stay out of. Now, people requested her presence at meetings, asked her opinion, valued her judgment. It was terrifying and exhilarating in equal measure. Reed appeared in the doorway. Can't sleep? Thinking too much. He crossed the room and sat on the edge of the bed. About how strange this all is, how impossible it should be. You choosing me over Ivy, your father tolerating my presence, Ivy being here, all of it. You think it's temporary, that it'll all fall apart? I think nothing this good lasts without a cost. Lila sat up. And I keep waiting for the bill to come due. Reed took her hand. What if there's no bill? What if this is just life, messy and complicated, but real? Then I don't know how to do that. Neither do I. He smiled. Guess we'll figure it out together. He kissed her then, gentle and certain, and Lila let herself believe, just for a moment, that maybe impossible things could last. Outside, the Montana night stretched vast and dark over land that would test them, break them, rebuild them in ways they couldn't predict. Somewhere in the darkness, Harlan Whitmore sat in his dying ranch and nursed his bitterness. Somewhere else, Silas Henderson looked at the water agreement and allowed himself to hope. And in the Brooks mansion, two sisters slept under the same roof for the first time in months. Both of them free in ways their father had never intended. The future remained uncertain. Danger still lurked in every decision, every choice, every moment of happiness that felt too fragile to trust. But for tonight, Lila was exactly where she'd chosen to be, and that was enough. The letter arrived on a morning, delivered by a rider Lila didn't recognize. Plain envelope, no return address, handed directly to her while she was working in the barn. Someone said to give this to Lila Brooks specifically. The rider said, Nobody else? You're the one who fixed the Henderson water dispute. I helped negotiate it, yes. Then you're who I'm looking for. He handed her the envelope and left before she could ask questions. Inside was a single page handwritten in script she didn't recognize. Miss Whitmore, you don't know me, but I knew your future mother-in-law, Eleanor Brooks. I have information about the Brooks Ranch that you need to see. Meet me at the old Parsons place, some distance west of town, tomorrow at midday. Come alone. What I have to show you could destroy the Brooks family or save it. Your choice what you do with the truth. A friend. Lila read it 3 times, her stomach tightening with each pass. This felt like a trap or blackmail or some elaborate scheme to pull her away from the ranch and do something terrible. But the mention of Eleanor Brooks nagged at her. Reed rarely spoke about his mother, and when he did, his voice carried a grief that hadn't healed. Whatever this person claimed to have, It was connected to her somehow. Lila folded the letter and shoved it in her pocket. She should tell Reed. Show him the letter. Let him decide what to do. But something stopped her. Some instinct that said this was information she needed to see first before deciding who else should know. The next morning she told Reed she was riding out to check the western fence line. Not a complete lie. The western fence did need checking, just not at the old Parsons place and not for the reasons he'd assume. Want company? Reed asked. I'll take Cal. You've got that meeting with the lumber supplier. He kissed her forehead. Be careful. Western Range is rough country. I've survived worse. Leela rode out with Cal for the first stretch, then told him she wanted to scout ahead alone. He looked skeptical, but didn't argue. Lila was past the point where the ranch hands questioned her judgment. The Parsons place had been abandoned for years, a sagging homestead slowly being reclaimed by the land. Lila approached cautiously, scanning for ambush, for armed men, for anything that screamed danger. Instead, she found an older woman sitting on the porch steps, probably in her later years, with gray hair and eyes that had seen too much. She stood when Lila dismounted. Miss Whitmore, thank you for coming. Who are you? My name is Eleanor Marsh. I was Eleanor Brooks' closest friend. We grew up together, stayed close until she died. Eleanor gestured to the steps. Please, sit. This will take some time to explain. Lila stayed standing, hand near the rifle on her saddle. Explain from there. Smart. Don't trust strangers. Eleanor didn't seem offended. Eleanor died some years ago. Before she passed, she gave me a collection of letters and documents, made me promise to keep them safe until the right person came along to use them properly. And you think I'm that person? I think you're the first person to enter that family who isn't controlled by Garrett Brooks. Which means you might actually do something with the truth instead of burying it. Leila's hand moved away from the rifle. What truth? Eleanor pulled out a leather satchel, set it on the steps between them. Eleanor discovered, about a year before she died, that Garrett had built the Brooks Ranch through fraud. Forged water rights, manipulated land claims, threatened families into selling at unfair prices. He destroyed people to build his empire, and he did it in ways that were technically legal but morally bankrupt. Leila felt cold despite the spring sunshine. That's a serious accusation. It's the truth. Eleanor found evidence, kept copies, wrote it all down. She confronted Garrett, but she was already sick by then, weak. He convinced her to stay silent, promised he'd make things right after she was gone. Eleanor's face hardened. He never did. Instead, he expanded the operation using the same methods. More manipulation, more intimidation, more families crushed under his ambition. Why are you telling me this now? Because Eleanor's last letter to me said that if the right person ever came along, someone with integrity who could stand up to Garrett, I should give them everything, help them decide what to do with it. Eleanor pushed the satchel toward Lila. You stopped a range war, negotiated peace between families that hated each other, stood up to your own father when he tried to sell your sister. That's the kind of person Eleanor hoped would appear. Lila stared at the satchel like it was a snake. What's in there? Letters Eleanor wrote detailing what she found, copies of forged documents, testimonies from people Garrett destroyed, evidence of water rights stolen from the Henderson family years ago, which is why they've been fighting so hard. They're not trying to steal Brooks' water. They're trying to get back what was stolen from them. The world tilted sideways. The Henderson dispute, the years of legal battles, the bitterness that had poisoned the territory, all of it built on theft Garrett Brooks had committed decades ago. Why didn't Eleanor expose this herself? She tried, but she was sick, weak, easy to dismiss as a hysterical woman. And Garrett had powerful friends, lawyers, judges, politicians. He convinced everyone Eleanor's illness had affected her mind. By the time she died, no one believed her accusations. And you kept quiet for years. Eleanor's face showed pain. I made a promise to wait for the right person. Eleanor knew that exposing this wrong could destroy innocent people, including her son. She wanted someone strong enough to use the truth carefully, not as a weapon. Lila picked up the satchel, felt the weight of it. Papers, secrets, dynamite, wrapped in leather. What do you expect me to do with this? Whatever you think is right. Make it public. Destroy the Brooks family. Force restitution to the families Garrett destroyed, or keep it quiet. Use it as leverage to make Garrett change his ways going forward. Or burn it all and pretend you never knew. Eleanor met Lila's eyes. Eleanor trusted that the right person would make the right choice. I'm trusting her judgment. Lila rode back to the ranch with the satchel tied to her saddle, her mind racing. Every few minutes she'd convince herself to turn around, give it back, refuse this impossible responsibility. Then she'd remember Garrett Brooks' cold eyes, his ruthless business tactics, his contempt for anyone who didn't serve his purposes. What if Eleanor was right? What if the entire Brooks empire was built on stolen land and broken families? And what the hell was Lila supposed to do about it? She hid the satchel in the cottage where Ivy was staying, told her sister not to touch it, and went looking for Reed. She found him in the north pasture, working with Cal to move cattle to fresh grazing. "How was the fence line?" he called. "Fine. Need to replace a few posts." The lie tasted like ash. "Can we talk tonight? After dinner?" Something in her voice made him look closer. "Everything all right?" "I don't know yet." That night, after Garrett had retired to his study and Rosa had finished cleaning the kitchen, Lila sat Reed down in their room and told him everything. The letter, the meeting, Eleanor Marsh, the satchel full of evidence. Reed's face went pale, then red, then pale again. "You're saying my father built this ranch through fraud?" "I'm saying that's what Eleanor believed, what she documented before she died." Lila pulled the satchel from where she'd hidden it. "I haven't read most of it yet. I wanted you to see it first." They spent the next hours going through the contents. Letters in Eleanor's careful handwriting describing what she'd discovered. Copies of land documents with obvious forgeries in the signatures. Testimonies from families who'd been pressured into selling at unfair prices or losing access to water that was rightfully theirs. A detailed account of how Garrett had manipulated the original Henderson water agreement, changing terms after it was signed to favor Brooks's interests. By midnight, Reed looked like he'd aged years. "This can't be real," he said, but his voice held no conviction. "Do you recognize your mother's handwriting?" "Yes." "Then it's real." Lila sat beside him on the floor, surrounded by evidence of corruption. "The question is what we do about it. We have to tell my father, confront him. And if he denies it, destroys the evidence, uses his influence to bury it again." Reed's hands were shaking. "This is my legacy. Proof she wasn't crazy, wasn't hysterical. Proof she saw the truth and tried to stop it." "I know. If we expose this, we destroy the ranch. Everything my father built, every alliance, every investment, gone. The Brooks name becomes synonymous with fraud." "Yes. But if we stay silent, we're complicit. We're letting him continue profiting from what he stole." Reed looked at Lila with desperate eyes. "What would you do?" Lila thought about her father, about the ranch he'd destroyed through greed and bad judgment, about the way Harlan Whitmore had blamed everyone but himself for his failures, about how corruption, left unchecked, only grew stronger. "I think we confront your father," she said. "Show him the evidence. Demand he make restitution to the families he damaged. Force him to rebuild this ranch honestly, or watch it burn. He'll fight us. Probably, but he might also be tired of carrying this secret. Your mother's death destroyed something in him. You said so yourself. Maybe part of that destruction was guilt." Reed gathered up the documents with shaking hands. "We do this tomorrow, together." They barely slept. Lila lay awake imagining every possible outcome, most of them catastrophic. Garrett Brooks was not a man who accepted blame gracefully. This confrontation could end with them thrown off the ranch, disowned, possibly worse. But the alternative was living with the knowledge that everything around them was built on stolen land and broken promises. Morning came too fast. They found Garrett in his office reviewing contracts. He looked up when they entered, immediately sensing trouble. "This looks serious." "It is." Reed set the satchel on the desk. We need to talk about how you built this ranch. Garrett's face went carefully blank. Excuse me? About the water rights you stole from the Hendersons. The land claims you forged. The families you destroyed. Lila's voice was steady. Your wife knew. She documented everything before she died. For a long moment, Garrett didn't move. Then he opened the satchel, pulled out one of Eleanor's letters, read it silently. His hands trembled slightly. Where did you get this? Eleanor Marsh, your wife's friend. She's been holding it for years, waiting for the right person to use it. Garrett set down the letter carefully. And you think you're that person? I think I'm someone who won't let this continue, Lila said. The Henderson water dispute exists because you stole their rights years ago. The families you pressured into selling deserve compensation. The people you manipulated deserve truth. You have no idea what you're talking about. But Garrett's voice lacked its usual force. Building something in this territory required hard decisions, difficult choices. Fraud isn't a hard decision, Reed said, and it's theft, and you built our entire legacy on it. Garrett stood abruptly. Your mother was sick when she wrote these, confused. I tried to help her, but she... Don't, Reed's voice cracked. Don't you dare use her illness to dismiss this. She wasn't confused. She saw what you were, and it broke her heart. Garrett flinched like he'd been struck. Here's what's going to happen, Lila said, stepping forward. You're going to make this right. Return the water rights to the Hendersons. Compensate the families you destroyed. Renegotiate the land agreements honestly. That would bankrupt us. Then we'll be bankrupt honestly instead of wealthy through fraud. You self-righteous little... Garrett caught himself. You think you understand this business? This territory? I built an empire from nothing. I gave Reed a future. I created something that lasts. You created something built on other people's suffering, Lila said. That's not a legacy. That's a curse. Garrett looked at his son. Reed, you can't possibly support this madness. Reed met his father's eyes. I support honesty, something you should have taught me, instead of teaching me how to manipulate and intimidate. I taught you how to survive. You taught me how to become you, and I won't do it. Reed's voice was quiet but final. We fix this, Father. All of it. Or I walk away and take Lila with me, and you can watch your empire collapse alone. The threat hung in the air. Garrett had built everything for Reed, to pass on to Reed, to create a dynasty through Reed. Without his son, none of it had meaning. You'd throw away everything I built, in a heartbeat if it's built on lies. Garrett sank back into his chair, suddenly looking older than Lila had ever seen him. For a long moment, he just stared at the documents spread across his desk, evidence of his crimes written in his dead wife's hand. She hated me at the end, he said quietly. Eleanor. She looked at me like I was a stranger, like I'd become someone she didn't recognize. You had, Reed said. I was trying to build something strong, something that would protect our family, give you opportunities, create security. Garrett's voice cracked. I never meant to become this. Lila felt a flicker of something, almost like sympathy, almost. Then stop being this, she said. Choose differently. It's too late. The damage is done. It's never too late to stop doing more damage, Lila said. You can't undo the past, but you can stop repeating it. Garrett was silent for a long time. Outside, the ranch continued its daily operations, men working, cattle moving, the machinery of empire grinding forward on its foundation of fraud. Finally, Garrett spoke. If I do this, make restitution, return rights, compensate families, we lose half our land, maybe more. The investors will pull out. We'll be reduced to a fraction of what we are. But we'll be honest, Reed said. Honest and poor. Better than wealthy and corrupt. Garrett laughed bitterly. You sound like your mother. She said the same thing. He pulled Eleanor's letter close, reading it again. She asked me, right before she died, if I was proud of what I'd built. If I could look at our son and honestly say I'd created something worth inheriting. What did you tell her? Lila asked. I told her yes. I told her everything I'd done was for our family. Garrett's eyes were wet. She died believing I was a monster. And maybe she was right. Reed circled the desk, knelt beside his father's chair. You're not a monster. You're a man who made terrible choices and can still make better ones. It's not too late, Father. It's not. The Hendersons will crucify me when they find out the truth. Maybe, Lila said, or maybe they'll respect that you finally admitted it and tried to make amends. Either way, it's better than continuing the lie. Garrett looked at Lila with something that might have been respect. You're the most dangerous person I've ever met. You actually believe people can change. I've seen it happen. Then you're naive. Or I'm right and you're afraid. Lila held his gaze. Your wife believed in doing the right thing even when it cost everything. Honor her by proving she didn't die ashamed of you. That was the blow that landed. Garrett closed his eyes, hands clenched on the arms of his chair. When he opened them again, something had shifted. All right, he said. We do this, but we do it carefully, strategically. I won't let this ranch be destroyed in the process of fixing my mistakes. Fair enough, Reed said. The next weeks were brutal. Garrett personally contacted Silas Henderson and requested a private meeting. Lila and Reed insisted on being present, expecting fury, accusations, possibly violence. Instead, Silas listened as Garrett explained the truth, showed him the original documents, the forgeries, the evidence of theft, admitted that the water dispute had never been legitimate, that Henderson claims had been valid all along. Silas sat in silence for a long time after Garrett finished. You're telling me I've been right for years? That my father was right and my grandfather before him? Yes, Garrett said. I stole your family's water rights, manipulated documents, paid off officials, and then I used my influence to make you look like the aggressor when you fought back. Why are you telling me this now? Because my wife documented it all before she died. Because my son and his future wife won't let me continue profiting from it. Because I'm tired of being the man Eleanor died hating. Silas studied Garrett with hard eyes. You destroyed my family's reputation, cost us legal fees we couldn't afford, made us look like thieves when we were the ones being robbed. I know. Sorry doesn't fix that. No. But restitution might. Garrett slid across a document. Full water rights returned to Henderson property. Compensation for years of lost access. A public statement acknowledging my fraud and your family's legitimate claims. Silas read the document carefully. This is half your water access. Yes. You'll struggle to support your herd. Then we'll reduce the herd or find other water sources or figure it out. Garrett met Silas's eyes. This is what I owe you. What my family owes yours. Why should I believe this isn't another scheme? Lila spoke up. Because we're witnesses. Reed and I won't let him back out. If he tries to manipulate this agreement, we'll expose everything publicly. Your family gets justice, or the Brooks family gets destroyed. Those are the only options. Silas looked at her. You're the one who negotiated our truce. I am. And now you're forcing your future father-in-law to admit he's a fraud? I'm forcing him to stop being one. There's a difference. Silas almost smiled. You married a hell of a woman, Reed. Don't I know it, Reed said. The agreement was signed with lawyers present. Silas took the water rights and the compensation, but refused to publicly humiliate Garrett. Your wife already paid the price for your crimes, Silas said. No point making your son pay again. But if you ever try something like this again, I'll bury you and enjoy doing it. Understood, Garrett said. Word spread through the territory slowly at first, then faster. Garrett Brooks had returned water rights to the Hendersons, had admitted fault in the decades-old dispute, had reduced his ranch's holdings voluntarily. Some people called it weak. Others called it honorable. Most were just confused. Garrett Brooks didn't admit mistakes or give up resources willingly. The investors were less confused and more angry. Several of them pulled out immediately, citing instability and poor judgment. The others reduced their commitment significantly. The ranch shrank by a third almost overnight. Garrett took it with a stoicism that surprised Lila. He didn't rage, didn't blame, just accepted the consequences and started rebuilding with what remained. One evening, Lila found him in his study staring at Eleanor's portrait. "You loved her," Lila said. "More than anything. But I loved power too, and I couldn't figure out how to keep both." Garrett didn't look away from the painting. "She asked me once what I was afraid of, what drove me to keep taking and building and dominating. I told her I was afraid of being weak, of losing everything. And now I've lost half of everything, and I feel stronger than I have in years." He finally turned to Lila. "You were right about courage, about change, about all of it. And I hate that you were right. I know, but I'm glad Reed chose you. Eleanor would have liked you. You're stubborn enough to match her." It was the closest thing to affection Garrett Brooks had ever shown her. Lila accepted it for the gift it was. Ivy appeared in the study doorway holding ledgers. "The revised budget is ready. We can maintain current operations with the reduced land, but there's no room for expansion in the next few years." "That's fine," Garrett said. "We'll focus on sustainability instead of growth." After Ivy left, Garrett said, "Your sister is brilliant with numbers. Wasted potential, raising her to be decorative." "Most women are wasted potential," Lila said. "We're raised to be decorative or useful, never powerful. And you're trying to change that." "I'm trying to survive it. The change is accidental." Garrett almost smiled. "I think you're lying. I think you came into this family specifically to burn down everything I built and rebuild it your way. If I wanted to burn it down, I'd have made those documents public." Lila moved toward the door. "I want to build something that lasts, same as you. I just want it to last for better reasons." She left him alone with Eleanor's portrait and the ghost of the man he used to be. Late that night, Lila lay awake beside Reed, both of them too wired to sleep despite exhaustion. "We just dismantled half of my father's empire," Reed said. "We made it honest, that's different." "Is it? We still destroyed what he built. We destroyed what was built on theft. What remains is actually his." Lila turned to face him. "Your mother tried to do this and failed. We succeeded. That should mean something. It means we're unemployed if the ranch collapses completely. Then we start over, build something new." Lila took his hand. "I'm not afraid of starting over. I've done it before." "I haven't. This ranch is all I've ever known." "Then maybe it's time to know something different." Reed pulled her close. "How are you so calm about this?" "I'm not calm, I'm terrified, but I'm also free in a way I've never been before. We did the right thing even though it cost us. That's worth something. Or it's naive idealism that'll get us killed. Maybe both." They lay in silence, listening to the house settle around them. Somewhere in the darkness, Garrett Brooks probably couldn't sleep either, wrestling with demons Lila had forced him to confront. Ivy was in her cottage working on budgets for a future none of them could predict. The ranch hands slept in their bunkhouse, unaware that the empire they worked for had shrunk by half overnight. And Lila felt, for the first time since arriving at the Brooks Ranch, like she might actually belong here. Not because she'd adapted to fit their world, but because she'd changed their world to fit her values. It was dangerous, presumptuous, possibly doomed to failure, but it was hers, and that made all the difference. The seasons turned and the smaller Brooks Ranch found its rhythm. The reduction in land and resources forced changes nobody had anticipated. Some were painful. Several ranch hands had to be let go. The seasonal crew was smaller. Expansion plans were shelved indefinitely. But other changes felt almost like relief. Without the pressure to constantly grow, to dominate, to crush competition, the daily work became just that. Work. Honest, difficult, but clean in a way it hadn't been before. Lila noticed it first in Garrett. He still worked from dawn until dark, still drove himself and everyone around him hard, but the desperate edge was gone. He negotiated with neighboring ranchers instead of intimidating them. He solved problems through collaboration rather than domination. One morning, Lila found him at the kitchen table with Ivy going over the books together. Garrett was actually listening to her suggestions instead of dismissing them. If we rotate the cattle through the south pasture every few weeks instead of monthly, we reduce overgrazing and improve the grass quality, Ivy was saying, pointing to numbers in her ledger. It means more labor moving them, but better long-term sustainability. Show me the cost analysis, Garrett said. Ivy slid across another page covered in her precise calculations. Garrett studied it, nodded slowly. Good work. Implement it starting next week. After he left, Ivy looked at Lila with something like wonder. He actually listened to me. You're good at this. Even he can see that. I spent years being told my only value was being pretty. Now I'm making decisions about cattle rotation. Ivy shook her head. How did this become my life? You chose it, Lila said. Same way I did, that's the difference. The wedding was planned for a clear day under the cottonwood trees. Smaller than Garrett had originally wanted, but more meaningful than a spectacle designed to impress investors. Just family, close friends, ranch hands who'd become something like family themselves. No fancy dress imported from back east, no orchestra, no performance of wealth and status. Lila wore a simple white dress. Rosa had helped her alter from something found in Eleanor's old wardrobe. It felt right somehow, wearing something that had belonged to Reed's mother, like Eleanor's blessing on a marriage that had started as rebellion and transformed into something genuine. The ceremony took place on the front lawn of the main house under cottonwood trees that had witnessed years of Brooks family history. Silas Henderson came, which surprised everyone. He stood in the back with his sons, nodding approval when Reed and Lila exchanged vows. Garrett gave Lila away, which felt strange and right in equal measure. This man who'd hated her, fought her, finally accepted her, not because she'd changed, but because he had. You're the stubbornest woman I've ever met, Garrett said quietly as they walked toward Reed. My son is either the luckiest man alive or the most cursed. Probably both, Lila said. Eleanor would have liked you, would have fought me to bring someone like you into this family. He paused at the makeshift altar. I'm glad she won that fight, even if she's not here to see it. He placed Lila's hand in Reed's and stepped back, eyes wet in a way Lila had never seen before. The vows were traditional: love, honor, partnership. Lila meant every word, but she also knew the real vow was something else entirely. A commitment to keep fighting for honesty, even when convenience tempted. To choose each other, even when choosing each other was difficult. To build something that lasted, not because it was powerful, but because it was true. When Reed kissed her, the small crowd erupted in applause. Cal Gardner whistled loud enough to scare birds from the trees. Rosa wiped tears with her apron. Ivy smiled with genuine happiness that held no envy, no bitterness, just sisterly joy. And Lila thought just for a moment that maybe impossible things could work out after all. The reception was barbecue and dancing, informal and loud and perfect. Ranch hands mixed with neighbors, old feuds temporarily forgotten in favor of celebration. Even Silas Henderson raised a glass to toast the couple. To Reed and Lila, Silas said, may they build something better than what came before. Here's hoping they're smarter than we were, Garrett added, and the two former enemies clinked glasses. Later, when the sun was setting and most guests had drifted away, Lila found herself on the porch with Ivy. Her sister had changed, no longer the polished perfection their father had demanded, but something more real. Hair pulled back practically. Dress, chosen for comfort rather than display. Hands ink-stained from hours of bookkeeping. You look happy, Ivy said. I am. Terrified but happy. That seems to be your permanent state. Leela laughed. Fair assessment. She looked at her sister. What about you? You happy? Ivy considered the question seriously. I'm free. That's close to the same thing. I get to make my own choices now. Even if all my choices are about ledges and cattle rotation. It's mine. Nobody can take it away. Father might try. Let him try. I'm not the daughter he remembers. Ivy's voice hardened slightly. I spent too long being what he wanted. I'm done with that. They sat in comfortable silence as the sky turned purple and gold. Inside the house, they could hear Rosa directing cleanup and Garrett arguing good-naturedly with Cal about something ranch-related. Normal sounds of normal life. "Do you ever regret it?" Ivy asked quietly. "Choosing Reed? Leaving everything behind?" Leela thought about the question. About the girl she'd been months ago. Invisible. Useful only for the work she could do. Convinced she'd never be more than her father's unpaid ranch hand. About the terror of riding away into darkness with a man she barely knew. About every difficult moment since then. Every fight with Garrett, every risk that could have destroyed everything. "No," Lila said. "Not even once. Even on the worst days, when everything's falling apart and I'm convinced we've made a terrible mistake, I still chose this. And that choice matters more than whether it's easy. You're braver than me. I'm more desperate than you. There's a difference." Lila squeezed her sister's hand. "But you're here now. You made your own choice, too." That took courage. Reed appeared in the doorway. "Wife, are you planning to spend our wedding night talking to your sister, or can I steal you away?" Leela stood smiling. "Depends. Where are you stealing me to?" "Somewhere without family, ranch hands, or responsibility, just for tonight." He'd prepared a campsite up on the ridge overlooking the valley, away from the house and the noise and the constant demands of ranch life. Just a tent, blankets, a small fire, and the vast Montana sky spreading out above them like eternity. They lay together watching stars appear one by one, not talking much, just existing in the same space without pressure to be anything other than themselves. "I never thought I'd get here," Reed said finally. "Married to someone I actually want to spend my life with. Running a ranch that's honest instead of powerful. Having a relationship with my father that isn't just fear and obligation." "You could have had all that with Ivy," Lila said. "Well, maybe not the honest ranch part, but the marriage, the family approval." "No. Ivy would have been exactly what my father wanted, which means eventually I would have become exactly what he was. Ruthless, isolated, married to someone who feared me instead of challenged me." He turned to look at her. "You make me better. You make me want to be better. That's worth every difficult moment. Even when I force you to dismantle half your inheritance, especially then." They made love slowly, carefully, learning each other in ways their chaotic courtship hadn't allowed. And afterward, lying tangled together under stars that had witnessed centuries of human struggle, Lila felt something settle in her chest. Not peace exactly. Life on a ranch never promised peace, but a kind of rightness. A sense that she was finally where she belonged. The seasons continued their cycle, and the ranch found its rhythm. Not explosive growth. Not empire building, just steady, sustainable operations that supported the families who depended on it. Garrett never fully lost his edge. Some men were shaped too deeply by ambition to completely change. But he learned to channel it differently. To build partnerships instead of crushing competition. To value integrity alongside profit. He taught their daughter to ride when she was young. Patient in ways he'd never been with Reed. Maybe because he'd learned finally that some legacies were worth more than land and cattle. That being remembered with love mattered more than being remembered with fear. On their daughter's birthday, Lila stood in the same spot where Reed had first chosen her. On that hillside overlooking the ranch that had seemed so foreign and intimidating. Now it felt like home. Messy, complicated, built on honest mistakes instead of successful fraud. "Happy?" Reed asked, appearing beside her with their daughter on his shoulders. Leela thought about the question. About the girl she'd been. Invisible, useful only for work, convinced she'd never matter to anyone. About the terror of choosing the unknown over the familiar. About every difficult moment since, every fight, every risk, every decision that could have destroyed everything. "I'm exactly where I chose to be," Lila said. And it was enough. More than enough. It was everything. Years later, when their daughter was old enough to understand, Lila would tell her the whole story. About the grandfather who built an empire on theft, and the grandmother who died trying to stop him. About the aunt who learned her own strength by losing everything safe. About the great-grandfather, who'd sold daughters like cattle and paid the price in loneliness. But mostly, Lila would tell her daughter about choice, about the terrifying, liberating power of choosing your own life even when it makes no sense to anyone else. Because that was the real legacy Eleanor Brooks had left. Not letters exposing fraud, not evidence of corruption, but proof that one person's courage could change everything. That speaking truth mattered, that integrity survived even when the people who embodied it didn't. Lila had inherited that legacy not through blood, but through action, through refusing to stay invisible, through demanding honesty, even when convenient lies would have been easier, through choosing love that required effort over comfort, that required submission. And now she'd pass it to her daughter, not as burden, but as possibility, not as expectation, but as example. The ranch spread out below them, in all as imperfect glory, smaller than Garrett had dreamed, more honest than he'd ever planned, sustainable in ways empire never could be. Cattle grazed on fairly accessed water. Fences marked honestly negotiated boundaries. Workers received fair wages for genuine labor. It wasn't perfect. Some days were brutal. Some years lost money. Some decisions backfired spectacularly. But it was theirs. Built on truth instead of theft. Maintained through partnership instead of domination. Passed down through generations who would know how it was earned and what it cost. That was worth everything. Lila took her daughter's hand, felt Reed's arm around her shoulders, and looked out over land that had witnessed fraud, redemption, and transformation. "Tell me the story again," their daughter said, as children always do. "About how you and Papa met." Lila smiled. "Well, it started with an impossible choice." And she told the story one more time, because some stories deserve endless repetition. Stories about people who were invisible, finding themselves seen. About empires built on sand, crumbling to make room for something solid. About daughters who refused to be property and carved out their own definitions of worth. Stories about choosing the terrifying unknown over the familiar prison. Stories about love that starts with respect and builds toward partnership. Stories about legacy that matters more than wealth. The sun set over the Montana territory, painting the mountains in shades of gold and crimson. Tomorrow would bring new challenges. There were always new challenges. But tonight, Lila stood with her family on land they'd fought to make honest, and felt the particular satisfaction that comes from building something that lasts for the right reasons. Not because it was perfect, but because it was true. And truth, Lila had learned, was the only foundation strong enough to support real love, real family, real life. Everything else was just performance, and she was done performing.